Alright, hello everyone, welcome again to another edition of the Late Night History Show. I'm your host, as you guys know, Carlos Alvarez-Macias, and tonight we're going to treat for you. We're going to be talking about Greek and Roman architecture in today's world. Most specifically, we're going to be talking about the columns. As you guys know, today's show wouldn't be possible without the help of two special people, one of them being Jorge Leonard. Thank you, George. And also our janitor slash artist, Lillian Trujillo. Thank you, Lillian. Okay, everyone, now before we dive into the topic for today, I'm going to be talking about some of the buildings here in the United States that incorporate these types of columns. For example, the pillar, as we did there, of the country, the White House, and also the Lincoln Memorial, and I'll dive into some more examples later on in this show. So, get ready.
So, before talking about the many buildings in the United States today that incorporate these types of technology, we must first analyze the importance of architecture in the Roman and Greek world. This was all done thanks to a Greek known as Vitruvius, who was an ancient author and architect from Rome, who wrote a book titled De Architectura, which translates to an architecture. The book is divided into 10 smaller books that each talk about a specific aspect in Roman architecture. On his first book, he talks about principles of architecture that depend on order, arrangement, eurythmy, symmetry, propriety, and economy. So this means that in order to have an appealing working building, these factors must be taken into consideration. There was one particular concept within his book that was very important, and it made most of the buildings look visually appealing to the Greeks and the Romans that we still see today. This principle is known as symmetry, which is a factor that these civilizations were able to incorporate into the buildings and thereby build an aesthetic and working structure. Now let's talk about the columns and why they are important in today's world. So, there is also more to ancient Greek and Roman architecture than just having a symmetrical and functional structure. The use of patterns allowed these buildings to stand out, especially in columns. So, why are columns important? Edward Bleiberg states in his book titled Arts and Humanities to the Eras that columns were a significant advancement because they, along with piers or walls, support horizontal members of a length limited by the strength of stone able to support its own weight. So, even though they also look aesthetically pleasing, columns also provide building support. Now let's head back to the studio where we will be talking more about columns, specifically the three main orders.
Okay, now let's talk about the three orders. So as you can see on our beautiful visual our artist Lillian drew, we got the Doric order, which really has nothing at the bottom, it's just boring. Then we have the Ionic order, which has a little bit more decoration, and then the Corinthian order, which is just a hot mess at the top. So, as a historian, something that I noticed here is that they started evolving through time. As you can see, the Doric order sort of tangled a little bit with the Ionic order, and therefore turned into the Corinthian order.
I would like to elaborate more on this idea of the Ionic and Doric order becoming the Corinthian order. So, according to Ian Jenkins, Athens assumed the mantle of Ionian enlightenment, cleverly marrying the Doric and Ionic orders to create a hybrid, forms that new set of standards in architectural refinement. So this means that the Ionic and Doric forms started to tangle with each other on the monumental architecture that was being done in the city of Athens. This led, once again, to making Roman and Greek architecture stand out. The Corinthian order is mostly seen in buildings that were meant to be seen as very decorative. The key takeaway here is that because architecture looked beautiful and it functioned properly, then today's world will decide to adapt it to their own buildings, as we will see in the following examples. So why are these columns still important and used today? So these orders and ideas that Vitruvius incorporated looked appealing to the people who started building the significant buildings in our country. The use of having aesthetically pleasing columns and a stable foundation allowed people in America to adapt a Greek revival during the 19th century. This means that people in that era in the United States were attempting to revive the glory of Greek architecture. This is why you and I can see so many buildings around the United States that are significant are being influenced by Roman and Greek architecture. Some examples of this can be seen in the White House, the Lincoln Memorial, and Federal Hall. I would like to state as to why I was very interested in this topic before heading back to the studio for concluding thoughts. So, partly the reason I chose this topic was because when I took a trip my freshman year of high school to Washington, D.C., I noticed that the Lincoln Memorial resembled the Parthenon in Athens, which was very interesting to me, and I really wanted to look more into it and why it was so symmetrical. So now, let's head back to the studio for some more concluding thoughts.
Okay, perfect. Now let's talk a little bit more about the architecture today from our favorite country, America. So first off, we have the beautiful White House drawn by our artist, Lillian. And as you can see, we also have some forms of ionic columns. We can also see how they're reflected today. And also on the Lincoln Memorial, who looks like he's having a nightmare. He's probably dreaming of someone, I don't know, painting them or something. I wonder that. I'm sorry, Lillian. So, what I concluded from this is that because Greece and Rome were two of the biggest empires back then, maybe the United States wants to look great too, so that's why they also still incorporate these columns. Or maybe they're also helped in today's world. But that's gonna be it for today. Thank you for joining me again on another edition of Late Night History with me, the host, and I will see you next week. Have a good day.